Hello and welcome. When you are learning to have more control in social interactions, it helps to model some of the best. Celebrities are among the best because they understand their place in a social hierarchy as being highly valued. One's social status is a very important component of frame control and the way that we organize around people in a social structure. Now, they also exhibit these powerful traits because they're so used to the reactions they get from people. Constant positive affirmation from those around them cause them to exhibit positive social confidence. And so it makes it very effective for us to model those mannerisms. But another thing they do is they invest in training to be more charismatic during interviews and avoid topics and frames that don't serve them or would paint them in a negative light. Now, media professionals, on the other hand, they have a goal to ask questions in such a way that negatively frame an interaction in many cases. Because if you have an interview that goes very poorly, where the celebrity says something out of context that's very offensive, now that person has a very famous clip or they have a very famous segment, and it adds to their, I guess, professional goals. So the key here is that we can learn from these types of interactions. We can model those interactions and we can take them into our lives to understand more about how to control frames in social and professional settings. Now, Quentin Tarantino here in this interview is being pushed, and I guess one might say even manipulated, into a certain frame, into a negative frame, which has to do with the violence of his movies and the potential effects of it. Now, it doesn't serve him to stay on this topic very long, so you'll see the techniques that he uses to control the frame. Also, if this kind of content is of interest to you, if you're looking to develop your ability to kind of recognize these frame control situations and you want to learn how to avoid them and to be more socially confident, then I would ask you to go ahead and subscribe because I'm going to be making a lot of great content around this.
Congratulations on the movie. Why did you want to make a movie with slavery as a theme? Did that just come with making a Western in that period?
So right now, the question that he asks
I've always wanted.
already starts framing the debate. So what a lot of people don't understand is that the framing begins sometimes before the conversation even begins. But when we're talking about verbal framing, asking a simple, sincere sounding question, innocent sounding question, can be the beginning of a situation where you're being pushed into a certain, I guess, perception of any audience. And so it's very important to consider the intentions of the person you're speaking with. Now, we can't always know for sure. We can't mind read, but we can start to notice patterns and learn when we're being pushed into a frame.
To explore slavery in a film before. But I think actually my real reason to I've always wanted to explore slavery, but I guess the reason that actually made me put pen to paper was to give Black American males a Western hero, give them a cool folkloric hero that could actually be empowering and actually pay back blood for blood.
And that's the revenge bit.
So the way that he frames his response is also a very positive framing. You know, it's much more positive than just, oh, I'm a director who made a movie about slavery.
I mean, is that essential to make
Well,
him a hero?
in the case of in the case of
Okay, so he says, is that essential for creating a hero? So this is an important question to ask. Is it essential? So oftentimes people will have you defend a position that you have with an implication that if something is not essential, if it's not absolutely critical, that it should be somehow done away with. Like, was it really necessary that you made a movie? And the implication is that he was going above what is necessary or what one needs to do in order to cover a movie with a hero as he's laid out.
ways to a genocidal white racist class in the institution of slavery, yes, that would be the reason to do it, as opposed to just a historical story where this happens and this happens and this happens and this happens and that happens.
So you can't be surprised by the controversy that's come along with it.
Well, you can't. I don't think you can actually make a movie about slavery in America that it's not going to be controversial.
Are you very disappointed by some of the reactions, Spike Lee especially?
Oh, I couldn't be happier with the reaction to this movie.
Are you disappointed by the reactions? Now, that's what we call a presupposition. The presupposition is that there were negative reactions, or at least enough reactions to be concerned about, or at least to be worth mentioning. And he says, I couldn't be happier with the responses. So he's using a technique here where you answer a question in the way you wished it had been asked. And this is very powerful because let's say the person is using a covert persuasion technique, or the framing, they want it to be very under the radar. They don't want people around to know that they have an angle, they have an agenda. And so they'll ask a subtle question. Well, when you answer back the question you wished you had been asked, so in other words, he had answered as if the intention of the other person, he sort of misinterpreted the intention of the interviewer as if he were asking about the positive responses, right? Well, now think of what the interviewer has to do to push that frame again. He has to extend that much further in order to be able to maintain some sort of facade of sincerity with the question, to make it look as if he isn't pressuring the conversation onto this sort of negative aspect of the slavery in the movies.
It's been fantastic.
It's good publicity, I suppose.
Well,
But
no. It's creating a nice debate. Even the people who don't like the film, all right, are actually I am responsible for people talking about slavery in America in a way that they have not in 30 years.
But you must care very deeply that this doesn't become, a film that stands out from the rest of your body of work as one that is, trashed by more people or anything like that.
It's not trashed by more people. What you're saying is not correct. It's
No,
not trashed by more people.
I'm not saying it is. I'm saying, that, are you concerned? I mean,
No, I'm not talking about the movie right now. You're talking about, I'm talking about there is.
Are you concerned? Are you concerned that this might stand out? So this is an interesting one, because what he's actually doing is he's putting forth the claim that it will be, or he's implying that it will be. And this is an interesting way that people will frame things or ask things. They'll say, are you concerned about this? For example, are you concerned that Joe may have stolen your wallet? Now keep in mind, zero evidence that Joe may have stolen your wallet. But just simply asking the question, we can actually introduce a topic into the conversation. And here, it's a great way for him to continue pushing, continue framing the debate towards the grounds that he wants. Now, at this point, what Quentin needs to do is get the heck off of this topic entirely. And he is taking the topic and going on to higher value frames and very important things that are more admirable than just making a movie with gratuitous violence. But he's also stepping away from the criticisms by saying, oh, there aren't bad criticisms, or this isn't that type of movie. So he's saying it's pretty positive. And then the interviewer is saying, are you worried it's going to stand out as that? When he hasn't really given any reasons that it would be, or at least none that Quentin actually is concerned about.
There's actually a dialogue going on about slavery right now that has not been happening at all. It's a subject people are afraid to talk about. And now because of this movie, people aren't afraid to talk about it. People are talking about it. Somebody likes the movie, and they write a review on this. I mean, especially in a world right now where you actually have the internet, where actually anybody can actually now speak publicly, which was not the case before. So now somebody actually writes a review for the movie and they like it. And then you read the comment sections, and some people who don't like it attack them, and say they're saying. Somebody who doesn't like the movie writes a blog about it, and the people who like the movie hold them to task in the comment section. That's a dialogue.
Let me ask you about violence. I mean, you said, everyone knows you make violent movies, you like violent movies.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've talked about two themes, or I should say the interviewer introduced two themes. That is slavery and violence. Two things that we would never consider to be very positive, and he's certainly not brought them up in a neutral way. He's brought them up in a sort of negative way. So he's selected a frame within those topics that's very negative.
Why do you like making violent movies?
I don't know. It's like asking Judd Apatow, why do you like making comedies?
You just get a kick out of it, or you just enjoy it?
Well,
or what?
Okay, so the languaging here. Why do you like making violent movies? Oh, you just get a kick out of it. Not really the best languaging, or I would say the most positive, right? We're not talking about a director's deep inspiration here. We're talking about a kick, right? He's sort of reducing it to this sort of, I don't know. It's definitely not good though.
I think I think it's good cinema. I consider it good cinema. You sit there in a movie theater when these cathartic violent scenes happen. I'm talking about the cathartic violent scenes. I'm not talking about there's two types of violence in this movie. There's the brutality of the violence in the day put upon the slaves
The rape and the
during the
whipping
time.
and
I don't think there's any rape going on in the movie. All right, but there's brutality to the slaves. That hasn't been dealt with in America to the extent that I deal with it. And I'm showing you that there was two Holocausts in America. This is one of them. We've dealt with the Indian Holocaust, the Holocaust of the American Indian in America. But we haven't been dealing with the Holocaustic aspects, the Auschwitzian aspects of the slave trade in America. My movie deals with that. Then there's the cathartic violence of Django paying back blood for blood.
And that's why, is that why you think people like watching violent movies? People who are not violent people, or twisted people in any way, but why it's okay to go into a movie and enjoy the violence?
Okay, so notice the languaging here. He's saying people that aren't twisted, right? He didn't say healthy, happy people. He said people that aren't twisted. So you got to pay attention to the negative words that people use. If they say it's not this versus it is this positive thing, right? What is our focus on? If somebody says it's not this, like, I am not a crook, what do you focus on? The not. It just kind of gets ignored and you focus on the images, right? So if he's saying, oh, people that aren't twisted, right, what would cause them to like that? Do you think that's what causes them to like that?
Yeah, well, it's a movie. It's a fantasy. It's a fantasy. It's not real life. It's a fantasy. You go and you watch a kung fu movie, and one guy takes on 100 people in a restaurant. That's fun.
But why are you so sure that there's no link between enjoying movie violence and enjoying real violence?
I'm going to tell you why I'm so sure. Don't ask me a question like that. I'm not biting.
This is great. Why are you so sure there's no link? Now, this is very important because, again, we have that question, does it concern you that Joe might have taken your wallet? How are you so concerned? What he's really doing is he's making a claim and then putting the burden of proof on Quentin Tarantino to defend himself, right? So it's sort of this guilty till proven innocent framing. How can you be so sure? So on this interview, in order to be innocent of this charge, which is a pretty disgusting charge because he's accusing him of, contributing to societal violence, right? Pretty ugly. If he just came out and said that, it would not go over well. It wouldn't be very professional. But if he frames it in a question, how can you be so sure? It seems to be a very disinterested question, like, oh, I don't have an agenda here. I'm just asking, how can you be so sure there's not a link? But he himself has not established any link, and Quentin Tarantino doesn't have anything to gain by sticking on this topic. There's really nothing to gain because, for example, let's say he does prove that there's no link. Let's say he does bring out a study. One of the most important, which would be silly, by the way, wouldn't really fit the context, but let's just say he was able to bite and he gave some sort of response to prove his innocence. The problem is the grounds on which this sort of debate is is happening on is going to be happening on the grounds of the interviewer. So regardless of the response that Quentin Tarantino gives, it will, if it's an attempt to demonstrate his innocence, it would still be falling into the frame of guilty till proven innocent. So it's very important here, and that's why this is one of the first times that Quentin Tarantino steps out of the interview to offer this sort of meta-analysis of the question being asked. I'm not going to bite. Now, this is important because it takes a little bit of boldness to do this. And earlier, when I said that celebrities are well aware of their status, that's a very important thing, right? So a lot of people might have trouble mustering up the confidence to do this, if they don't train in this type of conversation. Meanwhile, Quentin Tarantino, he's had media training. He's got a lot of guts. He understands his value. He understands that he is more valuable to the interviewer than the interviewer is for promoting his movie. And so he's going to act as if that's the case. So here, he used the technique where you take the covert technique and you make it overt. So he pointed it out, and that's kind of that warning shot of saying, hey, I see what's going on here. I'm not biting. I'm not interested. And now the very next thing the interviewer has to do is work that much harder to maintain that frame. In fact, if he tries too hard, then it's going to look as if he's overextending, like he's absolutely trying to push this intention of Quentin Tarantino, or this sort of narrative that he promotes violence in movies.
I refuse your question.
Why?
Because I refuse your question. I'm not your slave and you're not my master. You
I'm
can't
just-
make me dance to your tune.
I'm
not a monkey.
I
I'm not-
can't make you answer anything. I'm
Well,
asking you interesting questions.
And I'm saying I refuse.
Okay, well, no, I was just asking you why. That's fine.
So notice here, he starts to cover his mouth at this point. Now, can't read too far into body language. There's a lot of disagreement amongst behavior experts about what these body language cues mean. But typically, when you cover your mouth, it is a nervous tick, right? When you put your hand up by your face. And one of the important things with behavioral analysis, or like body language, is understanding a baseline. He hasn't done this prior in the interview, or at least not to what I've noticed. He puts his hand up to his mouth here. And I think that's understanding that he's just been completely shut down. And now he has to sort of think of a way to save face while also pushing a sort of sensational narrative during this interview without appearing to be uncharitable towards Quentin Tarantino.
But you see, Jamie Foxx has said we can't turn our back and say that violence in films,
Well,
or
then you should
anything
talk
that
to
we
Jamie
do,
Foxx.
doesn't have a
Then
sort
you
of
should talk to
influence.
Jamie Foxx about that. And I think he's actually here, so you can.
I'd love to, but I mean, it's interesting that you have a different view, and I'm just trying to explore that.
Yeah, and I.
Okay, it's interesting that you have a different view, and I'm just trying to explore that. Be careful of people who fake objectivity, who fake this sort of, well, I'm just asking questions. I'm just trying to get to the heart of the matter, and, well, it's my job here as an interviewer to ask questions. That can definitely be true. That can definitely be sincere, but often as well, it can be very insincere, and during those cases, it helps to be able to point that out.
Don't want to. Because I'm here to sell my
Also,
movie.
notice this. Look at his eyes right now. Do his eyes, he always has kind of an intense gaze, but do you think his eyes right there, what do you think they're communicating? I think it's communicating anger or contempt, sort of an intense energy there. He's definitely showing the interviewer that he's not going to be controlled. And that's very important. And actually, if you look up other interviews with Quentin Tarantino, there was one time where he actually beat up some guy who had a camera and was like following him around, kind of bothering him. And he just like whooped on the dude. It was pretty wild. So you can tell this guy doesn't really want to take too much crap from anybody, and he isn't going to give the interviewer what he wants.
This is a commercial for the movie. Make no mistake.
Well, you
And
have
I-
interviews.
Yeah,
So-
yeah. This
so
is,
you don't want to talk about anything serious.
I don't want to talk about what you want to talk about. I don't want to talk about the implications of violence.
So this is interesting. He's like, this is a commercial for my movie, make no mistake. This is important because what he's doing is he's redefining the interaction. He's saying, look, you've stepped outside of the bounds. I control the frame in this interaction. Remember, this is a commercial about a movie. Don't forget what this is about. In other words, saying, hey, I'm in control here. You are out of bounds. I'm not out of bounds. Remember the context that we have here in this interaction.
I'd love to, but I mean, it's interesting that you have a different view, and I'm just trying to explore that.
And I don't want to.
Well,
Because I'm here to sell my movie. This is a commercial for the movie. Make no mistake.
Well, you
And
have
I-
interviews.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. This
so
is,
you don't want to talk about anything serious.
You don't want to talk about anything serious. Okay, this is important. You don't want to talk about anything serious. Now, when you say anything serious, okay, there's a lot of things that could be covered in that. For example, one of the serious things that he previously brought up in the interaction was how his movie has started a conversation about slavery, would you think that's not serious? I mean, that's pretty important stuff, right? So by saying, oh, I don't want to talk about this one particular issue, he's been reframed as avoiding serious topics. Like he just somehow wants to talk to this shallow idea or only promote his movie and not talk about any of the societal implications of his creations, his works. Well, this is pretty ridiculous, and he shuts it down immediately, saying, oh, you don't want to talk about anything serious? I don't want to talk about the things you want to talk about. In other words, he just quickly points out, no, I didn't say I don't want to talk about anything serious. I just don't want to talk about this one particular thing you are trying to point out.
I don't want to talk about what you want to talk about. I don't want to talk about the implications of violence. I haven't wanted, because the reason I don't want to talk about it is I've said everything I have to say about it. If anyone cares what I have to say about it, they can Google me. And they can look for 20 years what I have to say about it. I haven't changed my opinion one iota.
No, but you haven't fleshed it out. That's the only reason.
It's not my job to flesh it out.
No, it's my job to try and ask you to.
And I'm shutting your butt down.
And that's entirely your
This
your
is a
your
commercial
right.
from my movie.
No, I know, but it's my job to try and explore some serious themes as well. I'm sure.
I invite you to explore some serious things, but not things that I have already been on the record for talking about.
Well, violence is such a big part of all of your movies, and it's an enjoyable part of your movies for so many people, and that's why I'm talking about this, because it's a very sensitive time at the moment. I mean, the Vice President is talking to people in the movie industry today about violence in response to
and you know where I stand on it.
Which is that there's no relationship. And
yes.
But you haven't said why you think there's no relationship.
It's none of your damn business what I think about that.
Well, it's my job to ask you why you think that.
And I'm
saying
very
influential.
No. Okay, so he's saying it's my job. I'm just doing my job. That's another important thing you'll see people do. It's like, oh, I'm just doing my job, right? But sometimes you don't have an issue with them doing their job. It's the particular way in which they're going about doing their job. So it's a very easy defense to just say, well, I can't help it. I have to ask these tough questions, when meanwhile 100 other interviewers might have asked him very respectful questions or didn't apply as much pressure as this guy is. So he's sort of hiding behind his job title as some sort of justification for the particular bad actions that he's taking here. And so that's something to be aware of. It'd be kind of like a boss being incredibly toxic and saying, look, it's my job as a boss to make sure things run smoothly around here. And you're like, look, I have no problem with you having authority. It's the particular way that you're carrying out that authority that I have an issue with.
And I'm shutting you down.
But you have a responsibility as a filmmaker, surely, to explain a little bit about
No,
what
I
you're
don't
doing.
have any responsibility to you to explain anything I don't want to.
No, not to me, but to your viewers, to your fans, to people who
They know
care about what it is that you're doing.
They know where I'm coming from. And I have explained it. And I have explained even what you're talking about. I'm just not giving it to you.
Why?
Because I don't want to, because I've done it already. I have explained this many times in the last 20 years. I just refuse to repeat myself over and over again because you want me to. For you and your show and your ratings.
Okay, well, no, it's
For you and your show. So since we're already on the topic of assigning intention to people or assigning a negative motive, you have this interviewer saying, oh, you just want to avoid serious topics, right? So already, I think he's kind of taken the gloves off. I think at this point, most things that Quentin Tarantino says would be fair at this point. I don't think that the interviewer has been very charitable, and I think it's obvious he has an agenda, but it's interesting that Quentin Tarantino fires back with saying, well, you just want to do it for your ratings, which is probably pretty true. That's the goal of somebody, just like earlier in the interview when the media professional said, oh, it gets publicity when he was talking about violence. All right, so that's another thing you'll see in these interactions. It's very important to point out there are responses for that, and typically the response is, well, I won't go into that. I'll go into that in further videos, but be sure to call people out when they bring up, intentions that you don't actually hold.
not about our ratings.
No, it is. It is about you want me to say it for you. For your show, this show, right here, right now.
Well, look, this is a news program. It's not a film program, so we explore serious themes. That's the difference.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you want me to do what I've already done before, and I am refusing.
Fine, that's your right. Let me also ask you, you said in a Playboy interview recently that you thought movie directors didn't get better as they get older. Are you getting better as you get older or worse?
Well, I think they don't get better when they get old. I think I'm still in the sweet spot. Well, I hope. That's up to everyone to decide. Am I?
I enjoy your movies.
Mm-hmm.
You probably wouldn't believe that, but yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering what you think is sort of is left. I mean, you've done 7 big movies.
Yeah, I'll let me answer your question about that. I mean, I just feel, I feel like filmmaking. Directors are like boxers; they have their time.
Okay, so the key takeaways here are when somebody is baiting you, when somebody is trying to draw a certain response from you, and you change the topic, and then they continue to draw that response from you, that kind of hints at they have an agenda. There could be many interactions and many places where you might find this. If you're in a social interaction, people might ask you things that are leading towards put downs. Now, not really nice people, narcissists, psychopaths, and just all around assholes will ask you questions that sort of lead you down a path of having to justify your existence, having to justify your positions on things that aren't really controversial. And ultimately, there are people out there that really just seek to control interactions. And for some people, it's pathological. So here for this media professional, he has professional reasons for wanting to do what he does. But there are people that are just absolutely pathological, have to control every interaction. And when you deal with those manipulative people, it helps to be able to spot the frame. So thank you for joining us and have a great day.